the conversation. My name is Shannon Taylor, and this is the conversation by blacks and Jews in conversation. Our guest, you've just seen. Why don't you introduce yourself, Odell?
Hi, I'm Odell Wilkens, and I'm Executive Director of the Equal Justice Alliance.
And our program today is like a part two to what you have already heard the preceding week. But if you haven't heard it the preceding week, shame on you. But you don't have to have heard it because it's a self-contained entity. And it's on vivisection and protest and a new act by Congress snuck in there before the elections. And you would think that the elections could undo it for those who wish to. But I'm told that it's like somebody with a corporation doesn't want anybody to know that they signed the wrong promotion, and they'll cover it up. But it's out there, and it can be changed, and you can persuade them if you want to persuade them. And we're here to discuss it in terms of the equation of so-called terrorists terrorizing medical labs that experiment needlessly on animals with those who are plotting to blow up people all over the world in the name of actual terror against human beings. The bill equates sentencing and penalties for the same, except that they just can't equate the victims as the same, so they just equate the penalties to be the same. We've had on previously Peter Muller, who is the director of Humane Watch. Is that it, Odette?
It's the League of Humane Voters.
And the humane voters, they vote humanely, or they vote in hopes of getting an agenda that is pro-animal rights. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right, Shannon.
And have they been successful?
I think they've been very successful, yes. Peter Muller is really great. He helped found the League of Humane Voters, and they're very successful in what they're doing.
I understand just now that the Congress has passed and added to the federal hate crimes legislation the category of gender and homosexuality and so on, and, lesbians and so on, which our organization, Blacks and Jews in Conversation, had wished to have added for many years, and we fought for it in New York State successfully, and after it had passed in New Jersey, we didn't see any reason why it shouldn't be included, but there's plenty of opposition. Of course, our organization provides for all voices and all opinions, and we welcome them onto the show, as we would a debate, which we've already scheduled elsewhere, on the subjects we discussed tonight. And this subject is certainly a heated one. But I confess my partiality. I see absolutely no reason to go on in this inane slaughter of our friends on the planet for needless research, for pointless research, for counterproductive research. I mean, it has been established by enough authors and enough scholars and enough scientists that we don't even benefit from animal research. Quite to the contrary, it usually gives us thalidomide babies, and worse, it gives us the wrong results, the wrong directions, and just a history of cruelty. The Nazis treated its victims like animals, and worse than animals. And if you treat your animals, in the words of Gandhi, if you treat your animals in such a savage way, that's the measure of the civilization. Odette, what are your views?
Oh, absolutely. And we are really paying the price for animal experimentation right now. There's a fantastic book by Doctors Greek and Greek, Sacred Cows and Golden Geese. And it's the human cost of experimentation on animals. And they really show through overwhelming medical evidence that animal experimentation has proven to be unscientific and unreliable, has actually been a danger to human health, and has really been a bit of a financial scam, actually, and they bring that out in their book. It is a fantastic book. You should definitely go out and read it, and whatever misconceptions you have that animal experimentation could possibly help with diabetes or AIDS or Parkinson's disease, this would certainly tell you what the truth is, because I think the truth has not really been told to us, and I think we're trying to find the truth out, and I think that this book actually does tell the truth. It is really a fantastic book, and he does give a lot of examples for how animal experimentation has really led to a lot of deaths, a lot of serious illnesses. And, you know, Shannon, you mentioned thalidomide, and the thalidomide babies was a huge fiasco. There was no amount of animal experimentation that could have prevented that disaster. And actually, it had been tested on animals, and because it was deemed to be safe to animals, you know, the doctors thought, oh, well, you know, there's no problem here. And as a matter of fact, what happened was that when thalidomide got released onto the market, there had been some human clinical trials or human results that showed that babies were being born with deformed limbs and flippers. Can you imagine that? And they still put it out on the market, and what they did is they tested on so many animals and species to find out whether it was actually going to be bad for humans, and you know, they couldn't find any animals. And you know what they did? They had to go all the way out to New Zealand to find a rabbit that actually had a negative effect on this rabbit at 25 to about 300 times the dosage for human beings. And because of that, they kept it on the market for another 5 years. And it wasn't until they finally got the message that 10,000 babies had been born with deformed limbs to finally take it off the market. Shannon, do you remember DES, that synthetic estrogen drug that was given to women a long time ago to prevent miscarriages?
I've been trying to forget it.
Well, what happened there is that the animal testing showed that there had been no problem with DES, but what happened was that it actually caused spontaneous abortions in pregnant women, and it also caused it had a high potential of causing cervical and vaginal cancer, not in the mothers who took the DES, but in their offspring, in their daughters. So daughters would be getting cervical or vaginal cancer, the possibility of it, because their mothers took DES. And that was on the market for 18 years. Imagine that. So, and sometimes you think, really, the expression that the cure is worse than the disease. Well, this is actually the case, and certainly it's been the case with a recent drug that everybody has heard about, and I know that you've heard about it, Shannon, and that's Vioxx. You know, Vioxx has caused a lot of deaths. I've heard different numbers. I don't really know what the number is, but I've heard 25,000, 50,000. I think lately I've heard 100,000. I really don't know how many deaths there have been, but those are a lot of deaths, and certainly a lot more than the number of people who we lost in Iraq in terms of American soldiers. And that was kept on the market, even though in the human trials, apparently it was found to have actually caused some heart problems in some of the human subjects. And but in animals, Vioxx was actually found to have a heart protective element to it. So it actually protected the hearts of, I think they tested on mice or rats or rabbits, and it protected their heart. But in humans, it was found to be completely different. And Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine has filed suit against the maker of Vioxx, who's Merck, to actually come out with the truth on why they actually put this out when, even though it tested fine with animals, and when I guess they found out that it didn't test well with people, that it was still let out on the market. So there's a lot still to be learned, there's still a lot to be discovered, and we hope to learn a lot from the PCRM lawsuit.
How did we get on the road to using animals as fodder for the allegation that we thereby learned what drugs we could use on humans? Was it H.G. Wells and the Island of Dr. Moreau with the worst characterization by Marlon Brando and better one by perhaps Charles Lawton, where you had this mad scientist on an island transforming monkeys into human beings by torturing them and cutting them in two, and then we had ligers where we had half lion and half tiger, and accomplishing nothing that way. The Bible says you will not commingle species. The Bible usually knows what it's talking about because it comes from God, and God created the species, and God puts right in the Bible how you have to help species and how you don't muzzle the ox while he treads out the grain, and you don't take the bird off the nest and the egg with the bird. You don't take the mother with the child, and you don't yoke together animals of uneven strength, the donkey with the ox, for instance, and you leave your field fallow for a year, give it a Sabbath as you do your animals. One day a week. With human beings, you treat them equal when it comes to rest. All wonderful laws, humane laws. It comes right from the Jewish Bible. And the Island of Dr. Moreau does not. An animal sacrifice for temple purposes was strictly regulated only for purposes of getting us away from child sacrifice, which everybody else was doing. And we don't have the temple anymore, so we don't do that anymore. So where does it come that we have the right to go trampling through nature, chomping through nature? I just saw a program about the Humboldt squid, which was found out to be a docile, intelligent, curious, intellectual kind of an animal that they had once said came from Jules Verne, was this abomination of a monster like the kraken that would come and crush submarines. It was anything but that. They are hooked together on these spiny needle things, and then they go crazy, seeing themselves all of a sudden by the hundreds pulled out of the water, and they go nuts. But only under those circumstances. Then there's Moby Dick, maligned and maligned and maligned. Whales are docile, intellectual. They don't go chomping on people's legs. You know, we have slaughtered the whales in the seas. The Japanese whalers, that is, have made it a fine art based on the inventions of Onassis in Greece with the whaling fleet and the exploding harpoon. What gives us this right? Where does it come from? How do we say that the Bible makes us the supreme being and the arbiter of animal life on earth?
That's a good question, Shannon. That's a mouthful. You had asked the question how animal experimentation actually started. You know, Doctors Greek and Greek give a fantastic historical explanation for how it started. And it goes all the way back to, I believe it's the 1600s, with Dr. Galen, who was seen as the father of modern medicine. And the Greeks say, Doctors Greek and Greek really talk about what happened during that time. He was trying to come up with medical discoveries, and they explained that he had told the world that he had done his discoveries based on animal experimentation, but indeed he had done it through autopsies. And at that time there was a prohibition, there was a religious prohibition against doing autopsies because it was considered to be immoral. So Doctors Greek and Greek really talk about the historical aspect of animal experimentation that really arose from this kind of religious prohibition. And it wasn't until the Renaissance period when there were a lot of Italian doctors who made tremendous progress, not from animal experimentation, but from doing autopsies. And that's how they really found out, apparently, how the circulatory system works and a lot of other wonderful medical discoveries. And it has continued to persist. There was, I believe, there was a Dr. Claude Bernard that is explained in the book, who reignited the interest in animal experimentation for some reason, and it just took off from there, even though animal experimentation has not been reliable in terms of the kinds of drugs that are good for people, and also, you know, Shannon, there's also drugs out there that are being tested on that probably should be out there and are not because they're lethal or show really bad effects on animals. So, for instance, aspirin, you know, if aspirin had to be tested on animals before it could come out to the market, it never would have come out to the market because it actually produces very serious effects and possibly death in animals. And the same thing with ibuprofen. Ibuprofen causes kidney failure in dogs. So that would have also been not brought to the market because of that. And look at what we would have been missing. And ibuprofen and aspirin are very important drugs now. In the United States alone, I think we must use about 29 billion pills of aspirin every year. It's a huge amount of aspirin that we use, and we would not have had that benefit if we had to rely solely on animal experimentation. I mean, look at penicillin. Penicillin did not really produce the kinds of results that its discoverer thought that it would in animals. And so it was put aside, and one day, just out of serendipity, one of his patients needed some medication, and he gave his patient penicillin, and with remarkable results. And that's what put penicillin on the market, not because of animal experimentation. You know, Doctors Greek and Greek really go into a lot of detail about this and about all of the other examples also of drugs that have produced very bad effects because of animal experimentation. And then you also have other drugs that would have also not come onto the market. I mean, for instance, Prilosec had apparently been withheld from the market for 12 years because of animal experimentation. And I think there's also an antibiotic, I think it's streptomycin, which also would have been withheld because it produces bad effects on animals. So you see, we are really paying the price for animal experimentation because we are paying the price by becoming seriously ill or dying because of these drugs, or because drugs that could actually help us are not coming to the market.
We need all these aspirin just to read the legislation that they produce to kill animals. And what happens to all this legislation now empowering the slightest protester, trespasser, and who has made his time and resources available to protest in the tradition of America what he believes to be a terrible onslaught against his fellow creatures? What is available? What remedies are available with this kind of legislation to such a person now facing these draconian penalties? You are an attorney, and if you would tell you know, some of your specialties, and if you would also tell of a conference that's coming up now with the City Bar Association on 44th between 5th and 6th, where people might learn about this.
Yes, Shannon, we are having at the New York City Bar Association, I'm a member of the Issues Pertaining to Animal Committee at the New York City Bar Association, and on May 22nd, we are having a panel discussion on the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. It's going to be fantastic. I hope that all of you out there can come. It is free to the public. It is from 6 to 9 p.m. and it's at 42 West 44th Street at the New York City Bar Association. And the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act is a very mischievous law because it was actually, it seems to have been put into effect in order to prevent protests of animal labs and to prevent the public from really learning more about the truth about the animal experimentation and how it really does not bring the kinds of medical advances that everybody thinks it does, and that it is that animal experimentation is really, not what it's trumped up to be. So, the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act it can potentially limit people's free speech rights to really, either demonstrate legally and to bring this information to the public. So that is a very important civil right that we should really try to preserve. And the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, unfortunately, equates loss of corporate profits with terrorism. So if, let's say, there's an undercover investigation that actually shows the absolute horrible and squalid conditions that these animals live in, or to actually show that these certain drugs may possibly come onto the market that should not have come onto the market, those people may likely be prosecuted under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act as terrorists because of potential profit loss. Now, as you said yourself, Shannon, in the beginning of this program, are you re-equating this with people flying planes into buildings and taking human life? I don't think that terrorism should be equated with loss of corporate profit. If there's a loss of corporate profit, there are definite legal remedies that already exist that can deal with any kind of loss of corporate profits. But if there is an undercover investigation, people are not really protected from being prosecuted under an anti-terrorism law just to show the public about what is actually going on. And really, let's face it, this animal experimentation, how reliable can it be? You don't have to be a scientist to know that people are not the same as pigs or mice or rats or monkeys. You don't need to be a scientist to know that there are very few differences, and in Doctors Greek and Greek's book, they do talk about the importance of being able to to expose what is actually going on in terms of animal testing, that it actually is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And actually, I actually saw an undercover film of a baby monkey that, upon its birth, had its eyelids sewn shut with coarse thread, and its head wrapped in gauze with electrodes attached to its brain, and those electrodes were attached to an amplifier that produced screechingly loud noises. And it actually showed the reactions that this poor monkey had, and her reactions were really, really horrible, and they were very difficult to watch. And is that science? Is this scientific? Are these scientific findings? What could possibly come out of any kind of scientific experiment that would do this to an animal, that would do this to a monkey? I don't see the scientific value of that. And a lot of people are questioning the scientific value of that. And Doctors Greek and Greek talk about that in their book. There are a number of Nobel laureates who talk about this and who question this, and a number of vivisectors themselves. As a matter of fact, Doctors Greek and Greek were vivisectors for quite a while, and they realized that it really was not producing the kind of results that people were expecting. And in terms of cancer cures, let's say, we've been researching cancer for a very long time. Have we found a cure for cancer? No. But we certainly know what cures cancer in mice because we've tested mice for several decades. So we've known for a long time how to cure cancer in mice, but we still don't know how to cure cancer in people. And as a matter of fact, there was an interview, or actually Doctors Greek and Greek talk about an interview or a comment that was made by the executive director of the National Institute for Health. And what he said is, yes, you know, we found what can cure cancer in mice, but still, you know, nothing for people.
We have about a minute or so left. I want to thank you so much, as usual, for all this expertise. I hope people are paying close attention, and I hope they do come to this conference. We'll be abroad in Israel with our second mission of Juris. We had our briefing, and we were briefed by the Consul General, no less, and the Assistant Director, Mr. Jacobson, of the ADL. We only get the top flight people for our briefing, because we have to hear it from the best sources. And I understand you have a stellar panel, no less than 8, not just attorneys, but activists. And it's the activists that generally move things along. And I wish you well. I wish you most great success. Any final words?
Yes, I definitely go out and buy Drs. Greek and Greek's book. It's called Sacred.
I got that idea. We don't have to go over that again. Your personal words.
I think that certainly the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act is really going to put a damper on people really getting the truth out. So that's what I think.
And for Peter Muller, your esteemed partner, well, we miss him, and he was on the previous show. And go and form a chapter somewhere. Chapters are springing up. The League of Humane Voters, and you know, when the animals have their rights secure, the humans have that many more rights secure. It's only bound to benefit the rest of us. We're not trying to take rights away from anyone else. We're trying to ensure that we all get one step up. And you know, once you see that the birds and the fish and those breathing the same air and swimming in the same water and crawling on the same land have the ability to do so and are healthy, then you know that we might stand a chance of having that. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And we really, whatever we do to animals ultimately happens to us. And we just really cannot rely on these unreliable results, because they actually don't produce reliable results. And you know, what do? We mutilate animals, and then what kind of reliable scientific evidence do we get in order to help us? And so the drugs that come out of these kinds of experimentation actually is ending up hurting us, it seems.
Thank you, and on to next week.